Should I tell them, Richie?
This isn't happening. This isn't real. This isn't real. It isn't happening. It isn't real. Come back and play! Come back and play!
People who have never done it might think that acting is just pretending for a living, but there's a lot more to it than that. In fact, it can often be an all-consuming craft, and as with anything that takes a lot of work, it's easy to go too far. It's a lesson that generations of stars have learned the hard way. They put everything they had into roles that required a lot of emotional and/or physical investment, but they went 1 or 2 steps too far. With that in mind, we've put together a list of actors who really got into their roles and changed after filming was done.
We had a kid. He was beautiful. Little boy. I love you.
You need to let go now.
These well-reviewed and often award-winning performances are fun to watch, but the actors will never be the same after preparing for and recovering from them. First, Adrien Brody's physical change for the pianist in 2002 is clear, but the actor has also talked about how hard it was to play Holocaust survivor pianist Władysław Szpilman. A role for which he won the Academy Award for Best Actor in 2003. He told the BBC that he gave up his apartment, sold his car, stopped using his phone, and moved to Europe in order to get ready. But the emotional effects of being hungry were the most surprising and hard thing for him to deal with. I've experienced loss. I've experienced sadness in my life, but I didn't know the desperation that comes with hunger. He said at times he wasn't sure if he'd come out of the experience still sane. In the end, he said it took him a year and a half to settle back into things. When Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas came up as a project, Johnny Depp jumped at the chance to play Hunter S. Thompson.
I feel a bit lightheaded. Maybe you should drive. Suddenly, there was a terrible roar all around us.
A hero of his and a fellow Kentuckian. To get ready, Depp pretty much moved into Thompson's basement to learn about his habits and way of life. By the time filming started, Depp's strange performance had the cast and crew worried that he was in over his head. People wondered if Depp and his co-star Benicio del Toro were really on acid because of how much they got into their roles. Depp was still in full Thompson mode a year after filming was done. He stayed close friends with Thompson until 2005 when Thompson killed himself. Depp allegedly paid $3 million to shoot Thompson's ashes out of a cannon. In Oliver Stone's 1991 movie The Doors, Kilmer played rock legend Jim Morrison. To do this, he first learned how to sing 50 of the band's songs. He supposedly spent hours in the studio listening to Morrison's vocal performances and watching endless footage of Morrison's interviews to get a sense of his personality and habits. On set, the cast and crew called him Jim, and many said that by the end of filming, they couldn't tell the difference between Morrison's singing voice and Kilmer's. But when filming was over, Kilmer said he needed therapy to get Jim out of his mind. Paul Rothchild, a rock producer who knew Morrison, said that Val Kilmer knows Jim Morrison better than Jim ever knew himself. Colin Firth plays the future King of England, George VI, in The King's Speech. He has to give a number of speeches and do a number of other royal tasks. Because a movie about a man giving a perfect speech to a crowd of millions of excited people,
I have received from His Majesty
then going back to his huge castle to high-five everyone he knows would be kind of boring. The movie has a villain in the form of George's nearly crippling stammer, which ruins almost every speech he gives until he hires a vocal coach. In real life, George had a speech problem that was almost the same, and he never really got over it. Firth worked closely with a voice coach and listened to recordings of George VI speaking to get a better idea of how to imitate his speech patterns, physical habits, and nervous tics. Firth put so so much of himself into the role that he said in an interview that he still stutters sometimes when he's just talking normally. He even did it during the interview. It's important to remember that this happened in May 2011, 8 months after the movie came out in September 2010. We think that Firth no longer has a stammer because in 2014's Kingsman: The Secret Service, when he was punching people in the neck with his gun, he said every word perfectly. During the casting process for House, the producers famously said that they wanted a quintessentially American doctor to play the lead role of Dr. House, but they ended up hiring British actor Hugh Laurie instead. On his audition tape, Laurie's American accent was so good that no one could tell he was British.
It's always shifting. I'll have a new line that I will just suddenly remember. It'll pop back into my head.
The director of the pilot episode, Bryan Singer, is said to have pointed to the tape and said, "See, this is what I want, an American guy." In the same way, Laurie really went for it when he walked with a limp to play House, who used a cane. So much so that the actor still walked with a limp in 2015, even though he had been acting like he needed one for 8 years straight on set. Laurie reportedly tried to make it easier on his leg by switching which leg carried the weight. He says that nobody ever noticed or told him about this while the show was being filmed or in the years since it ended. People say that Laurie's acting is so good that they can get past his British accent and the fact that he didn't always limp on the same leg, even though that was a key part of the character. That's skill. Moving on, Sarah Paulson's leading roles on The People vs. O.J. Simpson and American Horror Story earned her a lot of praise, but both of them required her to smoke. It's kind of a problem that Paulson doesn't smoke in real life, or at least she didn't until she started smoking several times a day on set. In an interview with Stephen Colbert, Paulson said that after she got over how disgusting it was to smoke for the first time, she started to really want cigarettes and couldn't wait to film scenes where she had to smoke.
Smoke as much as she does in this? Because you smoke constantly in this series.
Yeah, I don't smoke at all in life, so that's, that was
How do
something.
you do that? I smoke one
I
cigarette
put it in
and I
my
get
mouth
sick.
and I inhale it.
Some people would call this method acting because Paulson was playing Marcia Clark, who was a well-known chain smoker in real life. It's also known as being addicted to cigarettes, which is not good. Paulson called the whole thing a real situation, which is code for something that would be a problem for someone who isn't a star and can't pay someone to take cigarettes out of their mouths after filming raps. Lastly, Bob Hoskins had a great career, but the role of alcoholic gumshoe PI Eddie Valiant in Who Framed Roger Rabbit will always be the one that most people remember and love him for. During filming, Hoskins had to pretend to have a cool name, and he also had to spend hours a day talking to and acting with characters who weren't real. Hoskins would later say that he learned how to hallucinate, that Roger and the other characters he played were really there. This helped him deal with the fact that he always heard their voices, but never saw them on set. When filming was over, Hoskins found himself talking to himself all the time, and even had a hallucination that Roger was in the same room. His doctor told him to take a break from acting. It seems taking your job too seriously is not entirely that good for you, as these actors can attest. That's all for today. Till we meet again.